It is noon, so we are going to start. Thank you to all who have logged on to our District 89 bond referendum informational session. We are recording this session and it will be posted to our website. If you want to share that information with any friends who might not have been able to join us this afternoon. We do hope that you are able to learn a little bit about the bond referendum, and there will be an opportunity for questions and answers. You can see at the bottom of your screen an opportunity to type in questions. Mr. Hanley will be monitoring those questions, and at the end we will go through them and try to answer them to the best of our ability. Joining me today, I'm Emily Tamaru, Superintendent of District 89. Again, thank you for joining us. And we have Maureen Jones, our Assistant Superintendent for Finance and Operations, Tim Thomason, our Director of Buildings and Grounds, and Tammy Beckwith-Shalmo, who is with PMA Securities, who is our financial advisor. So we will go ahead and get started to allow you to hopefully maybe enjoy your lunch while you are learning about the bond referendum. Today, we will review on the community engagement process that led us to the board approving unanimously to put a question on the June 28th ballot, an overview of the referendum details, the work that will be done, as well as an opportunity for you to ask questions. Hopefully you're familiar with District 89 and you likely live in our community and hopefully know a lot about our schools. Our mission in District 89 is obviously very student focused, and we offer a well-rounded, comprehensive program for our students so that they can absolutely excel in everything that they do. We really focus on every single student, ensuring that they have what they need to be successful in the long run. We have 5 schools here in District 89, five building schools. Our preschool is housed at Briar Glen Elementary School. We have about 2,300 students and our 4 elementaries and Glencrest. We serve people from the community that live in Glen Ellen, Lombard, and Wheaton. The board approves a strategic plan for the district to follow and looks at that about every 5 years. We monitor our progress with the goals and report that back to the board annually. And the board has adopted most recently a strategic plan that has 5 core goals that looks at academic success, social emotional development, ensuring that we have highly qualified staff, and then of course engaging with our community and securing our fiscal responsibilities. So you can really look at the bottom 2 goals there with community engagement and effective use of resources. This referendum work really aligns to those 2 specific goals within our strategic plan. As you can imagine, student learning is the core of what we do. It's our business. No surprise there, being an elementary school district. And we do it really well, to be quite honest. We have a very passionate staff that's incredibly committed to our students. And we have hundreds of different learning spaces throughout our buildings, throughout all of our buildings, and the hard work really pays off. District 89 is one of the top performing schools in the state, as well as we are in the top 15% in the nation as well on our MAP achievement data. A little graph to show just the efficient use of our resources and kind of your return on investment. It is not lost on us that tax burden is a real thing, and we want to highlight for you that for District 89, we spend the lowest amount per pupil in District 89. These are the Glenbard feeder districts. So the 6 elementary schools that feed our high school, District 87, our students go to Glenbard South. And then the state average. And you can see not only are we the lowest, we spend the lowest amount of money per student of the Glenbard feeders. We're below the state average, but I'd like you to take a look at those academic scores because we're the highest. Our students are performing the best among those feeder districts. So it really is a nice return on investment when we look at District 89. And so obviously, as a school district, we want our schools, they have to be clean, they have to have clean air, they need to have secure entrances. Obviously, we need to make sure that they're safe and healthy and accessible so that really students and teachers can focus on learning and growing together. They don't want to be thinking about what happens if the heat goes out or if there's a leak in the roof. And so it's really critical that we continue to support our facilities and infrastructure needs for efficiency and productivity. And so when we look at our infrastructure needs here in District 89, all 5 of our school buildings are more than 50 years old. And the buildings have been incredibly well maintained, but they also need some additional work. Tim Thomason, who's on our panel today, our Director of Buildings and Grounds, absolutely does an amazing job with Tim and his 2 teammates maintaining our schools, but the systems are beyond some of their expected usage. And so we began this conversation a couple years ago, to be honest, in long range planning to make sure that we could meet the needs of the board and as well as the school district and the community. And the board set a goal. They talked to Maureen, Tim, and I and said, we really want to maintain our facilities. We want to ensure that they're healthy and safe, but we want to provide tax relief. And so please create a long-range plan that would allow us to do that. And so we worked hand in hand with Tammy Beckwith-Shalmo, our financial advisor at PMA, to really utilize some existing bonds to say, okay, how can we provide tax relief while still looking ahead to maintain our buildings? So all of the people in the community, in the District 89 community, will actualize a tax rate savings here on your spring bills. That will be, regardless of what the decision is in June, that savings will be actualized. And for the average homeowner, it's about $239 a year. This is locked in, it's not going anywhere. Maureen, this is based on the average home price in District 89, which is, if you can just remind me.
Sure, it's $421,000.
Okay, so if you're on the call, you know what your home value is. So the average home price for our community is $421,000, and the average savings for that homeowner is about $239. The second set of bonds are the bonds that we're talking about potentially renewing through a bond referendum, and they will expire later in the year of 2022. So a bond referendum is different than other referendums. It's only can be used for capital projects. We say brick and mortar. It cannot be used to pay teachers, supplies, transportation. They have to be paid off in a fixed amount of time. If you want to think of it as similar to a home equity loan, you might need a roof at your house. And so you might take out a loan against your mortgage to be able to do that. And so that is what a bond referendum is. We've gone through quite a bit to get to where we are today. And in order to understand how we got here, it is good to take you back just a few steps to see where we were. Recall that the board said, we need to make sure we maintain our facilities and buildings. And so we, of course, Tim and Maureen worked very closely with our architectural firm and did a full 10-year facility review and outlined every possible project you could possibly want, not necessarily need. All the needs were in there, but there were some wants in there as well, maybe some additional gyms or additions and that type of thing, to the tune of about $100 million. So we said, no, thank you. That's a bit steep. And so Tim worked with the architects and looked at the needs and got that list to around 57 million. And that's when we went to the board and the community and said, we need your input to really discern this list and get it down to a point where it will still maintain the buildings, but also provide tax relief. So recall that the board wanted to maintain our buildings, but have no additional tax burden for our community. So that brings us to our community engagement work. This group that's on your panel today, Maureen, Tim, and I worked with 27 different members of the community. They were residents, they were teachers, they were board members. There were people with kids in the schools, people without kids in the schools. And we also did quite a bit of online and phone communications. We were able to do some surveys. Overall, we had about over 800 unique data points, giving us information so that we can ensure that what we're bringing forward to the community is really built from community voice. So through that engagement process, we needed the community to say, these are your buildings, right? These aren't my buildings. These aren't Maureen's buildings. They're not Tim's buildings. Well, they might be pretty close to Tim's buildings, but they're definitely the community's buildings. And so we needed to hear from the community about what their priorities were. And so the first set of surveys asked our community to really rate how they felt about these 10 categories. And the community came back and said that those top 5 areas, so security, roofing, mechanical systems, electrical and plumbing, and basic renovations, were really the 5 areas that were the highest supported. What I think is interesting here is that all 10 areas all received at least 70% support from the people doing the surveys. And the people doing the surveys were representative of the community. There were phone surveys and called a number of people in the community, and those surveys match the demographic makeup of our community as well. So they talked to people without kids, with kids, never had kids in the school. Maybe they had kids in the schools 20 years ago. They have kids in the school now. So a real wide variety of folks. The community also weighed in on, all right, so you want to preserve your buildings, but how much do you want to spend on that? How do you think the board should invest their money to ensure that our buildings stay safe and healthy? And these 3 questions, the folks participating in the survey, think of those 800 data points, they were able to answer all 3 of these. So they could rate the $13 million question, they could rate the $20 million question, and they could rate the $27 million question, all knowing that all 3 of those options do not increase tax burden. Recall that it is a tax reduction. And so you can see from when you got to choose, when you could vote on all 3 options, all 3 options were pretty favorable, with the 13 million coming out with 63% support, and the 27 million coming out with 57, and the 20 million coming out just slightly lower. What's interesting here is that the group that we use to help with community engagement said that you really don't typically see this large of support for all 3 options. And I know that the unique piece with District 89 is because, again, when you see the word referendum, you might equate it to tax rate increase, but this is actually some tax relief with all 3 of these options. The next question required the community participating in the survey to pick just one funding level. So they couldn't pick 13, 20, and 27. They had to pick one of them. And you'll notice that 9% only of the population said no funding for school repairs, while 36% of those surveyed selected the $27 million bond referendum. And so that information was brought back to our board. And recall, when we started this conversation, the board set a goal to the district employees to maintain the buildings and provide tax relief. And so again, this month, when you get your tax bills, or this month or next month, when your tax bill comes, there is already a set of bonds that have fallen off, and that 100% of the property taxpayers in Community Consolidated School District 89 will actualize a tax reduction, an average of about $239 per homeowner, with an average home price of $421,000. The next set is what we're talking about. And if with a $27 million bond, there would be an additional $4 reduction, looking at a total of $243 of tax relief for District 89, while maintaining and preserving the buildings that our students attend every single day. So on March 21st, the school board of District 89, the 7 school board members, unanimously approved putting a $27 million bond referendum question on the ballot for the community to be able to come out on June 28th to be able to say if they in fact want to support that or not as we move forward. And so you might be wondering, what does this bond referendum cover? What work will you be doing with this with the additional funds if it is so passed. And so this slide here kind of outlines the scope of the work. And you'll notice that there are little percents right after each of the items. And I want you to think back to the list that the community prioritized with their 10 priorities in those top 5 areas. You can see that security was number 1. So 100% of the security items will be covered. You can see roofing, mechanical systems, those were highly rated on the community feedback. So those are the percentages of the projects being done. Because remember, there was a about $60 million project list of needs, and we're covering about 27 million of that. And so with the help of our director of buildings and grounds, Tim Thomason, our architects and engineers, they went through the list to make sure that the absolute needs were met to keep the health and safety of our buildings where they need to be so that our kids can come every day and our staff can come every day and not have any interruption to learning, while also meeting the community's priorities. This bond referendum doesn't do anything flashy. It really has projects in all 5 of our school buildings. And what it does is it focuses on ensuring that our buildings are safe and they're healthy and they're accessible. We're not adding gyms, we're not putting in pools, so it really isn't flashy work, but it is very important work, much like you have to maintain your home and keep it safe for years and years to come. That's what we need to do with our school buildings. And so I do want to ask Tim, he's better suited to kind of just very briefly highlight a few of, you can read the full list on this presentation as well as on our website, but Tim can highlight a couple of the projects here on this list. Tim?
Over at Arborview as well as Briar Glen for secure entrances, basically you can get into the building without having to go through the office, and that's a change we'd like to make to secure those entrances, forcing people to go through the office before they enter the building. And the roof replacements, there's hot tar and gravel roofs that have outlived their life expectancy, and we will go down, put a regular, you would call it a rubber roof on there to make sure the buildings are watertight. We did some substantial patching at Glencrest last year, and we'd like to avoid having to do that in the future. Mechanical upgrades and boiler replacements. Briar Glen has a HVAC, heating and cooling system, that's fairly antiquated by design and age. And we'd like to get something that's more efficient and more comfortable in there. And the boilers at Arborview and Briar Glen also have outlived their usefulness, that we're having a hard time getting parts. They're just come of age. And windows and exterior windows, we'd like to improve egress in the event of a fire event where the windows are actually operable and be able to get people out of the building better. And the parking lots themselves are pretty spidered, and we're actually losing chunks of the parking lot because of unsuitable soils underneath, which we'd like to take out and make a better substrate for underneath the parking lots and then repave them.
Great, thank you, Tim. And I'm actually going to turn the next slide over, to Maureen Jones, just to talk about the ballot language and the requirements that have to go into, and just so you understand what the ballot language looks like on June 28th.
What the ballot language asks is basically for the taxpayers' permission to issue $27 million worth of bonds. The question is pretty formal in how it has to be presented on the ballot. So we did name all of the schools so that if you're somebody who necessarily doesn't have kids in the school, but you know that there's a school in your neighborhood, you can identify with that school in particular. And it's basically authorizing us with the authority to go ahead and do equip and repair and alter the physical buildings. So again, just to address that, this referendum does not cover the operating costs on a daily basis for salaries, transportation, food service, any of that. It's really to do upgrades to the buildings.
Great, thank you, Maureen. And as Maureen said, the referendum question is a little wordy, and in the referendum question, you can't state that there's going to be a reduction in what you're currently paying in taxes. So again, it's really critical to understand the makeup of this referendum because it is different than other referendums. So the district will continue to host informational meetings. So those of you that are in attendance today, we encourage you to tell your neighbors. If they can't attend one of the ones in person, we have one next week and then we'll host another one in June. They'll be able to watch this recording on our website. And you should have received in the mail this week a newsletter giving quite a bit of information about the bond referendum. We will continue to send out postcards and information as well as videos. And there's up-to-date information, FAQs on our website. I do encourage you to read that information, share it with your community members. The more informed people are, our goal is just to make sure people go out and vote on June 28th. Early voting in person early voting starts June 13th. And then of course, election day is June 28th. We do have some time. I hope that for some questions, if anybody has any questions, we're happy to answer those. You can type those right into the Q&A. And again, here is the website that you can find any information about the school bonds to get more information. So we do appreciate you signing on, and we're going to give it a few minutes to see if there are any questions. I will answer a question. At the last informational meeting we had last week, one of our community members asked if there would be any energy savings with the new mechanicals, and we did work with our engineers, or Tim worked with our engineers and architects, and they do have an estimate about with the new mechanicals at Briar Glen, because those are the oldest. We're looking at about $22,000 to $23,000 worth of savings in utilities per year. That was a question that was asked at the previous meeting. So we have that answer now, so we'll answer it here. Are there any questions? Maureen, anything you want to add?
Yeah, I thought since we're answer questions from last week too. One of the questions that was asked last week was when the work would be done. So if the referendum is successful in June, then we would look to issue the bonds in the fall of 2022 and do most of the work in the summer of 23 and the summer of 24.
If there are no other questions, Tim or Tammy or Maureen, anybody have anything else from our team that you want to add that I may have missed? Okay. Well, I'd like to thank everyone for joining us today. We really appreciate your attendance, and obviously we think knowledge is power. So please just continue to talk about this in your neighborhoods and point people to the District 89 website to get all the information they need on the school bond referendum question on June 28th. Thank you so much. We'll see you soon. Take care.